Welcome to Midnight Hollow, where the darkest forests, forgotten places, and true chilling stories come to life. Tonight, we bring you 12 terrifying true stories that will make you think twice before venturing into the wilderness. Dim the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare for a journey into fear. This is Midnight Hollow, and your nightmare begins now. I was 21 when this happened. It was 2017, and at the time, I was working part-time at a gas station a few towns over from where I lived. It was one of those jobs I only planned to keep for a few months, just until I figured out what I wanted to do next. The shifts were usually easy. A lot of ringing up snacks and cigarettes and stuff like that, more so than the occasional person paying for gas and cash. During the day, it was annoying, but normal. The nights were different. The nights dragged. The place felt too bright inside and too dark outside, and every customer felt a little stranger. That night, I was working the closing shift by myself, and I still think about it all the time. The store closed at midnight. Around 9 or 10 at night, the phone started ringing. I answered without thinking anything of it. The second I picked up, I heard this weird voice. It was low and drawn out, like someone trying to sound like a killer in a horror movie. It reminded me right away of Ghostface from Scream. It sounded really forced, like someone trying to do an impression, but yet it was still unsettling. The voice asked if I was all alone in the store. I just stayed quiet for a second, then said something sarcastic like, "Yeah, you got me." And then I hung up. I figured it was one of my friends messing with me. I texted the group chat and asked which one of them was calling the store pretending to be a serial killer. They all found it funny and acted confused at first. One of them asked what I was talking about, then another said he was at home. I assumed they were just lying because that would have been the obvious response if they wanted to keep the prank going. About 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was that same fake horror movie voice. This time, they asked why I hung up. I once again sarcastically said, "All right, you got me." The voice let out this soft laugh that sounded weirdly real, not playful like I expected. Then it said, "I shouldn't be rude to people who know where I am." I hung up again, but this time I felt a little off. It was probably still a joke, but there was something about how calm the person sounded that got me. I kept trying to shake it off. Customers were still coming in at that point, enough to keep me distracted. People getting gas, buying beer, and getting lottery tickets, but every time it slowed down, I found myself looking at the phone. It rang a third time around 10:40. I answered, and I immediately regretted it. The voice asked if the store always got this quiet that late. That got under my skin more than I want to admit. I said nothing and hung up. After that, I texted my friends again, this time more seriously. I said it was getting old and asked who was doing it. Again, they all denied it. I started messaging them one by one. It was the same thing. One was with his girlfriends. One sent me a picture from his basement. One was apparently at a friend's house almost half an hour away. At that point, I started getting annoyed instead of scared. I thought maybe they had someone else doing it. But the truth was, even though the caller never said my name, he was saying things that match what was happening in the store, like how quiet it was. Around 11 o'clock, the calls started coming closer together. I stopped answering after the fifth one. The phone would ring, and I would stare at it and let it stop on its own. Then a minute or two later it would ring again. That went on for maybe 15 minutes. I started checking the cameras more. There were a few around the outside of the building and a few inside. The store sat by itself off a road that got pretty dead at night. There was a small patch of woods behind one side of the building and an alley-like area where the dumpster was. The outside cameras weren't great. They had blind spots and the picture at night was grainy. Still, I kept flipping through them, half expecting to catch one of my idiot friends crouched outside laughing. I didn't see anyone though. Then I started hearing little sounds outside, which at first I told myself was nothing. For example, a tap somewhere. Then what sounded like a light scrape near the sidewall. Then a noise by the back that sounded like someone stepping on loose gravel. It got to a point where I couldn't dismiss it any longer. I texted the group chat again and told them to seriously stop. I even sent a picture of the empty store and wrote that this wasn't funny anymore. They kept denying it. One of my friends actually called me from his normal number and I told him what was happening. He sounded genuinely confused and said he wasn't joking, nor was he involved in any joke. He told me to lock the door early if I had to. I didn't want to do that unless I really felt I needed to. Part of me still thought I was making too much of it. At around 11:40, one last customer came in. I remember the exact sound of the door opening because it made me jump. I looked up and saw just a regular-looking guy at first, maybe late 20s or 30s. Nothing outwardly crazy about him. He wasn't dirty or dressed weird. He just had this blank expression. He didn't say hello. He just walked in and started moving through the aisles. I watched him on the cameras while pretending not to. He took way too long for someone who ended up buying one bag of chips. He kept drifting to different aisles and then stopping. More than once, I saw the top half of his face appear above the shelves while he looked toward the counter. Not in a casual way either. I felt like he was checking on me. I kept thinking maybe he was high, or maybe he was tired, or maybe he was deciding what he wanted, but my stomach had that heavy feeling by then, like my body already knew something was wrong before my brain wanted to admit it. He was in there for at least 8 or 9 minutes. Then he finally came up to the counter with a bag of chips. He still didn't say a word, so I didn't either. I just took the chips and scanned them. When I looked down at the register, everything felt normal for 1 second. Then I looked up and caught him staring directly into my eyes. He held it for maybe 2 seconds. It doesn't sound long, but it was. There was no expression on his face when he did it. Then he looked down and paid. I handed him back the bag, and he turned and walked toward the door. I remember thinking maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just a weird guy. But right as he got to the door and pushed it halfway open, he stopped and turned his head back toward me without fully turning his body. His chin was slightly lowered, so his eyes had to look up at me. Then he smiled. I still don't know how to explain that smile without sounding dramatic. It looked like he knew exactly how creepy he looked, and he was doing it on purpose. It made every hair in my body stand up. Then he stepped outside, and instead of walking toward any of the pumps or toward a car, he walked around the side of the building. When he did it, he kept his eyes on me through the glass. He kept that smile too. I just stood there watching him until the angle cut him off. Then I rushed to the camera monitor and followed him there. I saw him round the building and head toward the side where the woods were. Then he disappeared into the blind spot behind the building. He didn't come back out. I waited maybe 10 seconds, then 20, then a minute. He never reappeared. That was enough for me to lock the door early, even though it was a little before midnight. This part might sound dramatic, but I texted my family and my friends and told them that there was a creepy guy outside, and I wasn't joking anymore. I said if I stopped replying, that meant something probably happened to me because of him. I rushed through the closing stuff as fast as I could. I barely cleaned anything. I kept checking the cameras over and over, expecting to see him pop back out. Nothing. Midnight hit, and I decided I couldn't stay there any longer. I grabbed my stuff, turned off what I needed to turn off, and went to the front door. I unlocked it and stepped out. And that moment of having to relock it was so tense, I couldn't have done it quick enough. Once I did, I took off running to my car. It was parked off to the side of the building. I got most of the way there, and just as I reached it and slowed for half a second, I heard fast footsteps, not running, but worse somehow, like speed walking steps slapping the pavement in front of the store. I turned and saw him. It was that guy. He had come from the front corner of the building and was moving toward me and my car fast. I yanked my car door open and threw myself inside. I locked the door and started the engine so fast I almost flooded it. The second the car started, I hit reverse and peeled out of that lot. I looked once in the mirror and saw him standing there in the lights watching me leave. The whole drive home, I was sending voice texts and regular texts to everyone saying I was right, that I knew he was going to come out of nowhere. None of that was a prank anymore. The next day, I texted my boss and told him exactly what happened. I said I wasn't doing overnights anymore. He looked at the footage later, and his response honestly made me even angrier. He got kind of defensive and said the guy looked like a regular customer to him. He said maybe I had just gotten spooked because of the phone calls and connected things that weren't connected. That pissed me off more than I can explain. I was the one there. I was the one getting the calls. I was the one who saw that guy disappear around the building and come speed walking at me out of nowhere when I left. I didn't care if the footage didn't fully capture how it felt because I knew what happened. I quit right after that. I didn't even argue much. I just told him if he thought that was normal, he could work the closing shift himself. I entered that job with attitude, and I was proud of it. Even now, many years later, I still think the caller and that guy who came in were the same person, even if I can't prove it. My name is Cadence. I work the closing shift at a small dive bar in the quieter part of my town. The place is right off the highway, but the parking lot also has a back entrance that's available to the general town. It's nothing fancy, just a dimly lit spot where the regulars know each other by name. and the jukebox has been playing the same rotation of classic rock for years. Most of our customers are locals, truckers passing through, and the occasional lost tourist looking for a stiff drink. I like it though. The routine is predictable. The tips are surprisingly decent, and I've learned how to handle the usual bar crowd. The talkers, the flirts, the quiet drinkers, and the ones who just want to be left alone. Weekends are obviously a lot more hectic, but the thing about working during the week is that I'm expected to work my night shifts alone. I don't even get a bar back to pop in now and again. Yeah, it's obviously easier work and slower during the week, but I miss the company of my coworkers. I tend to be pretty vigilant during my shifts because we do get the occasional bar fight considering the kinds of crowds we attract. That's why I clocked the guy immediately. It was sometime after 1 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday when he walked in. If I had to guess, I'd say he was in his late 40s, but he was extremely clean-cut and well-groomed. Not the kind of look you'd expect from a guy his age in an area like this. He was wearing a black turtleneck underneath a black trench coat, definitely well-dressed, but casual about it. I'm not sure how to explain it, but he had this aura of sophistication about him that makes you think of money. Real money, not the loud, look-at-me kind. He glanced around slowly before walking swiftly over to the bar and taking a seat. I also remember him having oddly good posture, but that's neither here nor there. When I walked over, he glanced at the bottles behind me and ordered something top shelf without hesitation. As I was pouring his drink, he asked me if I liked working here with a smile on his face. It was a normal enough question, so I answered him honestly. I told him yeah and smiled back. I then made a joke about being a bartender or something. I wish I could say I got a creepy vibe from him, but that's not the energy he was giving off. He genuinely seemed like a stand-up guy, kind of like the single dad at his kid's baseball game that gives the whole team a high five. He chatted with me for a bit, which I didn't mind since the bar was pretty quiet at that point. Eventually, he asked me if I ever thought about doing something bigger, which I admit was somewhat bizarre. Again, though, not a totally creepy question given the nature of the situation. I gave him my standard bartender smile and told him I was happy for now. He nodded and sipped his drink, seemingly disappointed at my answer for reasons I didn't understand. After a long pause, he asked me what time I got off out of nowhere. That question surprised me. I hadn't picked up any kind of flirting from him whatsoever, so I was a little disappointed to discover that our conversation had just been another one of those empty attempts at getting my number. I smiled and gave him a vague answer, trying to brush him off in a friendly way without seeming uptight. Before he could answer, I busied myself and began wiping down the counter, but he didn't press. He just smiled like he already knew, then drained his drink and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, laying it gently on the bar like it was nothing. Then, without another word, he walked out into the night. I didn't really know what to make of the encounter. I know it sounds like nothing, but his demeanor was just so far off my radar that I was intrigued. Either way, I figured I was never going to see him again and got on with my life. As it would turn out, though, I was wrong. About a week later, he came back. Only this time, he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him. She drew my attention since I hadn't seen her before. She looked like she was in her mid-30s and was dressed in a way that didn't quite match her age. Trendy but off, like someone trying a little too hard to blend in with a younger crowd. I watched her closely as the two of them approached the bar. Everything about her seemed calculated, from the way she smiled too easily to the way she leaned against the bar like we were already friends. As I was setting down napkins in front of them, the very first thing she said to me wasn't a hello or a drink order, but a compliment. She put on this overly joyful smile and said, "You're so pretty." Her fingers brushed against my arm as she said it, lingering just a second longer than normal. I laughed and thanked her, but I could instantly tell that something was off about this woman. The man didn't speak, which I thought was also a little strange given that he had been so talkative last time. They ordered drinks and poured them, and that's when questions came flooding in. The woman asked me how long I've been working here along with how old I was, and a bunch of other small talk questions like that. I answered in short, polite sentences, but I got the sense that this wasn't small talk. She was studying me. At one point, she looked over at the man, and it seemed like they were communicating despite not speaking. She looked back at me and told me that she ran an exclusive event club. She leaned in a bit as she said it, lowering her voice as if to prevent being overheard by another patron. She told me that she's always looking for young, fun people for private parties and that I'd make a killing, 10 grand for a weekend. I let out a small, forced laugh and told her it sounded too good to be true. She insisted that it was real and told me that a bunch of girls like me worked for them. Her smile never faltered at any moment, which was starting to creep me out. She steered the conversation back to the job, circling around the same words: fun, safe, exclusive. Then casually, she said, "You should step outside for a second. There's someone who can explain it better." My pulse kicked up. I wasn't playing around at that point. I didn't even bother pretending like I wasn't creeped out. "I'm good," I said in a firm voice. No smile on my face this time. Just then, a group of customers walked in, laughing and talking loudly. The woman's expression changed in an instant, her friendly mask slipping just slightly before she turned to the man beside her. Without another word, they left. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't unsettled after that. Those random people had just propositioned me for God knows what. I told my coworkers and my boss about the situation, and we all agreed to keep an eye out should those people return. My boss assured me that he was always a 15-minute drive away should I need him, and the bar security cameras were typically enough to deter any misbehavior. There wasn't really much I could do beyond that. It's not like those people had done anything illegal. I tried to push it out of my head, but a few nights later, after closing, I saw the car. It was parked across the street, engine off, just sitting there. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but the feeling of being watched crawled over my skin like static. As I walked to my car, I kept my head down, my keys clutched tight in my hand. When I pulled out of the lot, I checked my mirrors. The car followed. It stayed back just enough to avoid suspicion, but every turn I made, it was still there. I took a random turn onto a side street, and it followed. Another, still there. I started freaking out internally. I knew it was them. I forced myself to stay calm and think. Then, without hesitating, I navigated and pulled into the parking lot of a police station, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles practically turned white. The second I pulled in, the car sped off. Nothing happened after that for a while, but I knew it wasn't over. It turned out I was right. It was a slow weekday shift, barely anyone coming in. By midnight, I was wiping down the counter, half thinking about closing early, when the door creaked open. It was the woman. I immediately sent my boss a text as inconspicuously as I possibly could. I looked back up and the woman was staring at me with that same artificial smile. She walked slowly to the bar and sat down with her hands folded neatly. I was debating just telling her to leave when she said, "Thought I'd come check on you." My stomach started twisting, but I did my best to hide it. I told her we were about to close and that she had to leave, but she made this pouty face and asked for just one old-fashioned. I thought about denying her, but I figured pouring the drink would stall her long enough for my boss to arrive. So, I turned around and got started, trying to keep my cool. And then I heard it. The soft, unmistakable click of the front door shutting. I whipped around. The woman was gone. I felt this awful pit in my stomach as I stepped toward the entrance. Through the glass, I saw it. A black van idling just outside. Without thinking, I locked the door as quickly as I could. But then, metal rattling from the back door. Someone was trying to get in. I didn't think. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could, a metal shaker, and clutched it like a weapon as I dialed 911 with my other hand. There was no way the police would get there in time. So, I thought about making a run for it out the front door, but I didn't for whatever reason. I was bracing myself for a fight when I saw headlights pulling into the lot. It was my boss. The sounds on the back door suddenly stopped, and a few seconds later, the van pulled out of the lot with a screech. I embraced my boss and told him what had happened, and he said he had gotten the license plate of the van as it was leaving. When the cops arrived, my boss reviewed the security footage with them. It was worse than I had imagined. Just before the woman left, the cameras had captured two masked figures crouching near the front door, waiting. There was another person in the back who was banging on the door with his fist, clearly trying to flush me out to the front. It was downright horrifying. To make matters worse, the plate number my boss had caught turned out to be unregistered. It's been quite a while since this incident, but no progress has been made. The only good news to come out of the whole thing is that my boss doesn't make me work alone anymore. Despite that, I'm still extremely uneasy anytime I'm scheduled for a night shift. I still question how they knew I'd be working alone. It doesn't make any sense. Even now, I often think about what would have happened had I given in to fear and run out the front door. I used to work the night shift at a gas station/convenience store off a quiet stretch of highway. I say used to because after what happened to me a few months ago, I won't work a night shift again. It's a small station, the kind that barely gets any business once it gets late. Most of my shift was spent restocking shelves, wiping down counters, and occasionally ringing up a trucker or traveler passing through. I remember the whole thing vividly. It was just past 2:30 in the morning. By then, even the truckers had mostly dried up, and I was left with basically nothing to do. I scrolled mindlessly on my phone, trying to kill some time. At one point, I stepped outside for some air, rubbing my hands together against the cold. I exhaled a few times, watching my breath disappear in the cold. The parking lot was empty, just the pumps, the road, and the dark stretch of trees beyond. The neon sign flickered faintly, and I remember it being hazy out, like you could literally see the moisture in the air. Even with the highway not too far off, it was pretty silent out there. Right as I was about to walk back towards the store, I noticed something move out of the corner of my eye. I whipped my head around and realized there was a person standing behind one of the pumps. How had I not noticed him earlier? He was wearing a dark red hoodie with a hood up, and he had both hands shoved in his pockets. There wasn't a car in sight, so he obviously wasn't fueling up. The only thing was he didn't seem to be heading towards the store either. He was just standing there turned toward the store like he was watching me. At first, I figured maybe he was waiting for someone, but something about the way he moved rubbed me the wrong way. He was kind of shuffling about in this circular pattern. I entered the store, but made sure to keep an eye on him through the glass. I kept track of him while pretending not to, hoping someone would drive up and pick him up or something. But after a few minutes, he started walking toward the door, slow at first, then suddenly pushing inside like he'd made up his mind all at once. He walked up to the counter, but didn't say anything right away, just stared at me like he was sizing me up. Then, in a rushed, almost rehearsed way, he muttered that his car had broken down just before the pumps. He said he needed a jump or maybe just a little gas to get to the next town. I was literally shocked. He wasn't even trying to make his story believable. Like, I couldn't believe he actually expected me to buy his BS story. I offered to call a tow truck instead. No, he said too quick, shaking his head. He just needed a flashlight. Maybe some help checking under the hood. Something was definitely off. That much was true. The way he spoke, the way he watched my reaction, it felt like a test. To be fair, though, people walking into gas stations at that hour are usually a little strange. And I started wondering whether he actually needed help and was just an odd person or on something. I asked him where his car was parked, and he told me it was just beyond the highway entrance. I was obviously skeptical, but then he pointed at the monitor behind me. I turned to look at the screen, and to my surprise, there actually was a car parked out there. I thought to myself, oh crap, maybe this guy really does need help. And that's when it hit me. I had literally just been outside, and I would have remembered a car parked out there. I glanced back at the monitor and saw the slightest movement near the car's back bumper. Someone was crouching just out of view. A cold wave of dread hit me. I forced a casual smile and agreed to help the guy, but not before telling him I needed to grab my phone from the back office. I turned slowly, not wanting to spook him, but the second I was out of its direct sight, I slammed my hand onto the emergency panic button under the counter. The alarm went off instantly, screeching through the store. I expected him to attack me, but what he did instead was even more unsettling. His nervous energy disappeared. No more fake urgency. No more shifting from foot to foot. He actually relaxed. His whole body language shifted. And then he smiled. Not a panic smile, not an embarrassed one either. A slow, knowing grin like he had all the time in the world. Like this was amusing to him. I was in shock. I didn't even have time to get physical with him. In one fluid motion, he turned and bolted. I ran to the monitors just in time to see both of them take off. Not toward the car, but into the woods behind the station. The car just sat there, engine off, headlights off. No one inside. By the time the police arrived, it was exactly as I saw it. The car was still there, but the men were gone. No footprints leading away, no sign of them anywhere. And then one of the officers pointed something out, something I hadn't noticed before. The front passenger door was open. There had been a third person inside the whole time. The police took my statement down. I turned over the surveillance footage, and that was that. A few days later, they followed up with me. They had the car towed and ran the plates. Turned out it had been reported stolen nearly a week earlier, over 100 miles away. No one had come forward to claim it. No reports of missing persons. No other crimes linked to it. Just an abandoned vehicle in the middle of nowhere with no explanation. That was months ago, and still nothing. I don't know why convenience stores are such popular targets, but I can say for sure that I will never work another night shift again. This happened a couple weeks ago. I worked the night shift at Walmart. It's not the worst job in the world, but after a while, it starts to feel like you're just floating through time. The nights blend together. Same shelves, same routine, same dull hum of the overhead lights. Hopefully, something better comes along. I usually hang out in and stock the electronics section, which is nice because it's quieter than the other areas. People don't exactly come rushing in at 2 a.m. to buy phone chargers and Bluetooth speakers. Most of the customers are either night owls killing time or truckers grabbing last-minute supplies before heading back on the road. That's why I noticed him. At first, I didn't think much of it. Just another guy wandering the aisles, probably waiting for someone. But after a few minutes, I realized he wasn't shopping. He wasn't even pretending to. He just kept appearing. Every time I glanced up, he was lingering nearby, hovering in the next aisle over or standing a little too still by the clearance section. He wasn't looking at anything. He was just standing there watching me. I told myself I was overthinking it. The store is big, and maybe he was just taking his time. But the way he moved, always just close enough for me to notice, never actually picking anything up, it set something deep in my gut on edge. I was waiting for him to just get on with it and ask for my number, but he never approached me. It was like he wanted me to see him, which didn't make any sense to me. I went to radio someone about it, but realized that the batteries in my radio must have been dead because it wasn't working. Eventually, I started debating whether I should go find a manager when I felt a hand wrap around my arm. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but before I could react, a woman's voice rang out loud, friendly, overly familiar. She exclaimed, "There you are," before going on a little spiel about how she had been looking all over for me. I turned, completely thrown off, and saw a woman I had never seen before in my life. She was smiling, her grip firm on my arm like we were old friends reuniting. Before I could say anything, she leaned in and whispered, her tone dropping to something low and urgent. "That guy's been recording you. Follow me." My stomach dropped. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance back. The man was still there, only now he wasn't even pretending to browse. He was staring right at me. A cold wave of fear crept over me. I let her pull me. I didn't even question it. The way she grabbed my arm, the way she spoke so loud and casually, like we were two old friends reuniting, I clung to it. I was beyond grateful that someone had realized what was going on and put herself in an uncomfortable position just to help me. She kept up the act as we walked, rambling about something, maybe a trip she had taken, maybe an inside joke we supposedly shared. I barely processed the words. My thoughts were stuck on him. Had he really been recording me? That was creepy as hell. I wanted to know if he was still following us, but I couldn't muster the courage to turn around just yet. The woman steered me through the aisles, moving fast. I barely noticed where we were going. Only that we were going, that the distance between me and that man was growing. In all honesty, I was kind of expecting her to quit the pretending to know me at some point, but she kept it up. At one point, it was getting a little uncomfortable, so I glanced behind me, and to my relief, that man was no longer following. The woman kept pulling me forward, though. I told her that we were good now, and that we should probably go find my manager. But she just squeezed my arm tighter, telling me that he was lurking somewhere. I thought to myself, so what? What's he going to do in a store full of employees? I was obviously worried at first because no one was around, but now that I wasn't alone, I started realizing that there wasn't much of a point in being scared anymore. I told her this, but she continued moving. I told her I was serious and planted my feet, twisting my arms slightly to loosen her grip. "You can let go now," I said, but she didn't. She smiled at me, but something in it was off. "Come on, just a little further," she said, basically tugging me at that point. I glanced around. The store was basically dead. We had moved past the registers, past the self-checkout, past the aisles that saw the most foot traffic. The warehouse section loomed ahead, dimly lit and nearly empty. Beyond that was the side exit, the one without cameras, the one employees used for loading shipments. That's when it dawned on me. She was leading me straight to the exit. I didn't think. I screamed for help as I yanked my arm free of her grasp with all my might. She lost her grip just enough for me to pull free. I didn't waste another second. I turned and ran toward the front of the store. As I fled, she yelled out something behind me. She yelled for me to come back, followed by my name, which I hadn't given her. I kept running until I saw one of my coworkers who was running toward me, most likely reacting to my screaming. I told him to call security, which he promptly did. That woman was long gone, though. By the time I told my story to the security guards, that woman and that man were nowhere in sight. They reviewed the security footage, and just as I suspected, the woman and man walked into the store together. She had been with him the entire time. The man's face was clear as day in one of the frames, but hers was always turned away. I had a feeling she was the mastermind behind the whole thing, so I was infuriated that the cameras hadn't picked her face up. Every second of it had been planned. The police got involved, and the whole thing went down as a failed abduction attempt. I'm still waiting for a resolution about it. That man should definitely be easy to track down, given his face was caught on camera. I have no idea how that woman knew my name. That's what terrifies me the most. Those people hadn't just picked me at random. I was a direct target. When my cousin Cody and I were in our early 20s, we went on a handful of camping trips around Colorado. This happened, I believe, when I was 22 and he was 23, and it happened in Irpo Forest. It was my first time camping there, not Cody's though. It was in the middle of the week. Our jobs allowed us to have off days in the middle of the week, and we'd often go on our campouts then to avoid traffic and crowds. I always let Cody take charge on these trips. He's the Eagle Scout, not me. We parked by a picnic area, and we set foot into the woods from there. After about 15 minutes of hiking deeper into the woods, we found a good spot to set up camp. A good spot meaning a big enough clearing to fit 2 tents, the portable stove, and a campfire. The first thing we did was unpack our stuff and set up our tents. Cody has always been a lot quicker than me in pitching a tent. He does it in only a few minutes. It always takes me over 20 minutes, or rather it always took me over 20 minutes, as I haven't been camping out in the wilderness since this. The next thing we did was create a ring of stones for a fire, then gathered some sticks and wood. He did bring some fire starter and a lighter, so I guess we kind of cheated, but oh well. It was at the point in the day when the sun was going down. We had a fire going, and now Cody was grilling up some steak and burgers. One thing about Cody is he always went all out with the food on these trips, and he's a really good cook, so I always trusted him with feeding us. Of course, we had our bear spray in case the smell of the food would attract a black bear, which Cody always said was very unlikely. He always says the real thing you got to worry about in the middle of the woods is other people. As we ate our steak and burgers, we cracked open some beers and had some classic rock playing on the speaker. If you've never been camping, you don't understand how good of a vibe moments like this are in the wilderness with a friend or family member and some beers reminiscing about good times and vibing to music. As it got dark, we started playing card games on this little folding platform table we brought specifically for cards. After playing more traditional card games, we started playing Uno, and this was when we heard something out in the woods. I paused the song on my phone so that the speaker would go silent. It was clear now. We heard a person humming and footsteps from beyond the trees in the pitch blackness of the forest. Cody urged me to find the flashlight. I tried, but by the time I found it, the sounds had faded away. I asked Cody if that was something to be concerned about, and he said it definitely was unusual for someone else to be this deep in the woods, let alone creepily walking by a campsite with an active campfire humming loudly. I was a bit shaken, and I saw Cody was too. We went back to playing cards with the music much lower now. When we least expected it, a big stick landing in the middle of our campsite made us both jump out of our skin. It didn't fall from a tree. This thing was thrown at us by someone. Cody started yelling something along the lines of "Whoever's out there messing with us, get a life and off." And then footsteps could be heard once again in the distance. They were walking away from us. I said we should pack up camp and move somewhere else. He said absolutely not in the dark. We both had bear spray, and he advised to just keep it next to me in my tent when we go to sleep. It was the closest thing to ranged self-defense weapons we had. We kept hearing sounds like tree branches cracking in the distance. Sounds that you would never expect an animal to be making. Someone was out there, maybe multiple people. That much was clear. We had to go to sleep eventually, so we agreed that maybe we should take turns staying up to keep watch to make sure that no one comes to our campsite and steals anything or worse. Cody agreed to take first watch. He said he'd stay up and read his book. So I crawled into my tent and then my sleeping bag and went to sleep. Waking up in the middle of the night while camping is normal. You're in a cold outdoor environment in an uncomfortable sleeping bag. Any number of things could wake you up. I didn't yet know what woke me up. I was still in a fog. My brain didn't feel fully woken up yet. I looked up and saw a head peering into my tent. It looked like Cody. I rubbed my eyes, but really it was the darkness that was preventing me from seeing anything of his face. I said Cody, thinking he was waking me up to take my turn of keeping watch. I said groggily, "Is it my turn?" I stared at the head peering at me in my sleeping bag, slowly growing more awake every second. Then I heard the zipper to the tent quickly zip up, and his head disappeared. I laid back down in my sleeping bag, but only for a second. I suddenly had some weird moment of clarity where I shot to an upright position and listened as the footsteps walked away. "Cody," I said. He didn't answer. I unzipped my tent to peek out to the campsite. The fire was dead. Cody wasn't out there. I went over to Cody's tent, which was zipped up. I unzipped it and looked inside to see Cody fast asleep in his sleeping bag. I got chills, goosebumps, whatever you want to call it. I almost screamed at the realization. I started shaking him awake, and when he finally awoke, I told him someone's here at the campsite. It took him a minute to come back to reality, just like I did, but when he did, he grabbed his bear spray. He said he must have dozed off while reading. He said I should sleep in the tent with him tonight, but to do that I'd need my sleeping bag. He came outside of the tent with me and stood watch as I ran to my tent to grab my sleeping bag. In my tent grabbing my sleeping bag, I heard that goddamn humming again from outside. I grabbed it, and Cody whispered at me to hurry up. I said, "You hear that too?" He said yes. We both got back in his tent and zipped it up with our cans of bear spray by our sides. I tell you, in those moments, I wanted nothing more than for a bear to come and save the day. The hours dragged on as I stayed up while Cody slept. After 3 long, horrible hours, I woke him up and we switched. When Cody woke me up, it was almost dawn. There was light outside, so we packed everything up, and by the time we were done, there was plenty of light to hike back to the car. While we could have driven somewhere else and had another night of camping elsewhere, neither of us were feeling it anymore. This was a haunting experience, and I think we both just wanted to be in the safety of our houses. It's been 6 years since this happened, and he's hit me up a few times since then about camping, but I haven't really had interest since this experience. People are just too scary. Why was someone out there stalking our campsite, and the sight of that person's head in the dark, just looking into my tent, it was straight up from a nightmare. I may never go camping again. Honestly, whenever I was scared as a kid, my dad had always told me in life that you should not be scared of ghosts. Fear the living because they can actually hurt you. In my late teenage years, I came into some money after my father committed suicide, and I received an inheritance from him. At the time of my dad's passing, he and my mom owned a cabin up in Oregon by Mount Bachelor. The cabin had been put up for sale since my mom could no longer afford the payments, and renting it out was not covering the payments either. The cabin was set to go on the market for sale in less than a month and was in the process of finalizing all the paperwork with the realtor and lawyer. So for that month's time, the cabin was not going to be rented out any longer and was just going to be vacant. I saw this as a chance to get away for a while and clear my head in light of all the things going on. I quit work, packed up my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog Midnight, and headed up in my dad's car to the cabin. My first 2 days at the cabin were normal, and nothing out of the ordinary happened. I spent my days playing with Midnight in the snow and snowboarding, and the evenings playing PlayStation or listening to music, drinking, and smoking out on the balcony. I had already stocked up on food, cigarettes, and liquor, so I was pretty much a shut-in aside from the occasional out to hit the slopes. With my dog's company and DVDs and PlayStation as entertainment, I was quite content and started to feel relaxed after all the drama that had preceded my outing. The cabin itself was 2 stories. The bottom story had the living room and a side guest bedroom along with a small kitchen. Upstairs had another 2 rooms along with a walkout balcony attached to the master bedroom. Most of my time was spent either in the living room, kitchen, or master bedroom. I never ventured into the other rooms and always kept the doors leading into them shut. The 3rd day came around, and I was going through my usual routine of playing with my dog, playing games, and watching DVDs. That day, it was a pretty heavy snowfall, so instead of hitting the slopes, I stayed in. That's when things started getting a bit weird. In our area, there were only 2 other cabins adjacent to ours, maybe a block away from each other. All other cabins aside from these 2 were around a mile away from ours. Surrounding us was mostly forest and very tall pine trees. Both these cabins were empty, and from the past couple of days, I knew that no one was currently staying there. Around midday, while outside with my dog, I noticed what looked like footprints in the snow around the area surrounding our cabin. It was still snowing, so the footprints looked semi-fresh, like someone had just been there in the last 20 to 30 minutes. Before me, I thought that maybe someone was staying in the cabin near me that I may not have noticed. Maybe they were shut-ins like me, alright, whatever. The footprints led away from my cabin, and they disappeared in the snow towards the denser part of the trees. I disregarded the footprints and went back inside. Nighttime came around, and I decided to head to bed. My dog Midnight was laying on the bed with me when I noticed his ears perk up to a listening position. This was followed by him quickly jumping off the bed and running downstairs to the living room. I lay in the bed and stayed silent. I was honestly freaked out, and I could hear him moving around downstairs back and forth. After around 5 minutes, he ran back upstairs to me and started to do his doggy dance for the sign that he had to pee or that he wanted to go outside. Well, fine, I can't say no to him, so we both went downstairs to the outside driveway for him to do his thing. Only he didn't want to pee. As soon as we were outside, he started to pull his leash, trying to drag me to where he wanted to go. He kept looking into the dense part of the trees where the prints had been earlier, but he also kept sniffing the side of the house and looking up towards the roof. After he figured out that I was not going to go where he wanted, he sat himself down and just stared into the darkness. A bit unusual for him, but alright, maybe there's some forest animals out there that he wants to chase down. But this, I didn't want to chase anything, so I pulled him back inside, and we both headed back upstairs. Around half an hour later, I was lying in my bed when I heard what sounded like hooves walking on my roof. It was only a series of around 6 steps, and I rationalized that it could be a pine cone falling from a tree onto the roof, or maybe a kind-hearted forest animal running around. But here's the thing, the steps seemed to be spaced apart like a man-length stride, so it was really freaking me out. Midnight also heard the noise and was quick to run to the balcony screen door, expecting for me to let him out. Alright, you know what, I'm a tough guy, and at the time I considered myself to be fairly well built and strong enough to handle myself, so I grabbed my coat and shoes along with my cigarettes and flashlight and went out onto the balcony. As soon as I went outside, I lit up my cigarette and started canvassing the roof with my light. Nothing there, and the snow on top was undisturbed. Weird was it all in my head. What about Midnight hearing the noise? Maybe he was feeding off my paranoia. I started to calm down and relax again. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness, and I kept smoking and just staring at the stars and trees next to our cabin. That's when I saw it. In a tree that was a little taller than our cabin and around 20 feet from the balcony, I saw what looked like a man crouched in a squatting position in between 2 branches. It looked really tall, like 8 or 9 feet, and it was really skinny. It was squatted on one branch, and its freakishly long white arms were extended above its head, holding on to the branch above it while its mouth was wide open with no expression. What the hell is that? I wasn't sure if I was really seeing this thing, and stood just staring and sat there motionless. I noticed Midnight stand up and start pacing behind me and lightly barking at the same time. The thing still did not move. I put my cigarette out and was debating on shining the light in the thing's direction, but something in my head kept screaming not to. So I walked backwards to the inside of the room and pulled Midnight with me. Once inside, I locked the door and shined the light in the thing's direction, but there was nothing there. I shut the curtains to the screen door and retreated back to bed. But later on in the night, I heard some light tapping at the screen door, like someone was tapping on the glass with their fingers. It was consistent and did not stop for nearly an hour. Midnight seemed to stare at the door, but he wouldn't go near it anymore. The weirdest part was that I had a feeling like someone was inviting me to open that door, but at the same time I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head telling me to stay in bed and don't do it. I listened to my dad's voice and just stayed where I was. I passed out eventually and woke up in the morning. It didn't take me long to pack everything and get the hell out of there. I was searching Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace for a new phone. This was a long time ago, so it had to be like an iPhone 7 or something. Phones still had the home buttons back then. I found this listing for a phone. It was some generic looking post iPhone whatever for sale, new around $300. It was a really good deal for the time that I remember. He told me all the small details I needed to know, that it was factory unlocked, never opened, and stuff like that. He sent me a video of the box, too, still sealed. The guy, whose name was Melvin, seemed nice and easy to talk to over text. I got his number and we discussed a pickup point. His location on the Facebook ad was much closer to me, but over text he was telling me he was only there this morning and now he went about an hour north. I wasn't happy about this, but this was a really good deal and I didn't want to pass it up. I started asking a bunch of friends if they'd want to come on an adventure with me. Really just a way of making the chore of accompanying me for an hour drive seem fun. My friend Martina actually agreed to come with on the promise that I buy her food for coming. So this Melvin guy sent me the address of a police precinct about an hour away, saying he only does deals in police precinct parking lots to avoid scams. I obviously had no problem with this. In fact, it made me feel a little more confident in this whole thing. I picked up Martina on the way around 8:30 at night, and off we went. Her being in the car and having someone to talk to made the trip more fun. It was also a Friday night, so afterwards we could go out and do whatever we wanted. When I got off the highway, we were about 10 minutes away, and we found ourselves in a very secluded, quiet area. It seemed like a lot of different wooded areas, occasional buildings and houses, and then more woods. We got to the police precinct, and there was no one visibly parked in the parking lot besides empty police cars, of course. We drove around the whole building a couple times and didn't see this Melvin guy who said he was in a black Ultima. So I decided to call him. He picked up and said he's having issues with his car on the side of the road and asked if I could come to him. He sent his location and I checked it. He was on the side of some random road with nothing on either side, and by nothing I mean woods. That's the kind of area we were in. He asked me to come help him jump his car. He had jumper cables. I said, yeah, I guess I can do that. I mean, we drove the hour to get there. I didn't want to just drive another hour for nothing. Martina was shaking her head the whole time I was on the phone. The guy said, see you soon, and hung up. Martina then basically screamed, no way, this is sketchy, we're going home. I told her we'll just drive past the location he sent and see what's up. I did agree with her, though this seemed incredibly sketchy. I just was very upset if we drove 2 hours for nothing. We did drive to the location, and when we got to it, we saw the reflection of a car's front lights coming up on the pitch black road we found ourselves on. As we got closer, I slowed down, and it was in fact a black car, but we couldn't see anyone inside or outside of it. Mind you, it was very dark, but I feel like we would have seen someone's head on the inside or something. Martina said to just keep driving, and I said I know. It was about the sketchiest thing I'd ever seen. A pitch black road between two patches of woods, no street lights, no other cars in sight. A pretty convenient place to break down and have someone who's coming with a wad of cash to buy something from you come and meet. I drove right past it. Immediately Melvin starts calling me over and over. I ignored every single call. Then he texted me saying, I saw you just pass me, why didn't you stop, turn around? Ignored. Martina is a very positive person, so she laughed about this whole situation and then said, okay, you owe me food. So I looked up the nearest diner and we stopped there for some food. It was a quiet, small diner. We were just about the only people in there, even on a Friday night. The waitress just took our coffee order when a lone guy with his hood up steps into the diner and sits in one of the bar stools. He was wearing a navy blue dirty-looking hoodie. He glanced over to Martina, and I then looked straight ahead, talking to the lady working behind the counter, apparently ordering a coffee. The man kept glancing at our table like every minute. So I whispered to Martina, don't look now, but that guy at the counter might be the Melvin guy. The waitress came with our coffees, asked if we were ready to order. I said, a few minutes, please. When the lady behind the counter handed that man his coffee, he said loud and clear, thank you, darling. It was that guy from the phone's voice. Melvin, or whatever his real name was. I told Martina that's him, we need to pay the check and leave. I waved the server over and whispered to her if we can just get the check. She asked if something's wrong, and I noticed the guy look over as I said this. I said, yes, we just needed some coffee for the road. So she got the check, I paid, we downed our coffees and left the building. We got in my car and Martina said, oh my God, he's getting up. I looked into the diner and saw that guy leaving towards the door as quickly as possible. I drove us out of that parking lot and sped down the road, and yes, we noticed a black car in the parking lot that could have been the one that we saw on the side of the road. I was driving too fast for him to have caught up. We got back on the highway, and I was flying for a while until I got a low tire pressure light come on. I knew instantly he slashed my tire. The PSI was going down fast, so to avoid damage, I pulled to the side of the highway and parked it. I went out to confirm that my tire was slashed. I had to replace the tire with the spare, which took about 15 minutes. The whole thing was a disaster, and if you're wondering, yes, I still got Martina dinner that night. Now Martina and I look at it as a crazy story that we can look back on and tell people. It's absolutely horrifying, though, how close we were to walking into a trap. I was seeing this girl for a few weeks. We'd been on 2 dates. Her name was Phoebe. We matched on a dating app and eventually met a few days later. She was 4 years older than me. Our first date was drinks, and our second date, we went out with my friends on a weekend. My friends had neutral opinions about her. They thought she was, quote, nice and kind of quiet. They'd later reveal their actual thoughts on her, but I'll get to that later. Phoebe invited me to an upcoming high school reunion party. She told me she didn't want to go alone, and honestly, after she came to hang out with my friends, I felt like I owed her. This reunion party was falling on a random Saturday in the fall. It wasn't organized by her school, though. She told me that it was organized by this rich guy from her class, and it was being hosted at his house. I haven't had my high school reunion yet, but as far as I know, these things are usually held at bars or catering halls. We got to this guy's house, and it was admittedly a fancy-looking house. It had a gated driveway, but no fancy cars parked anywhere in sight. I thought was maybe the owner parked his car in the garage during the party. The second we stepped into the house, I felt like everyone was staring at us, more specifically me. A few people came up to Phoebe and hugged her hello, then shifted their attention to me. I felt almost like I was being interrogated with some of the questions these people were asking me, like my whole life story, what I do for a living, who I live with. Finally, Phoebe pulled us away, only to go talk to more people who I also felt like were asking really personal and weird questions. There was also something about all the people in here. They seemed to be older looking than 28, which was the age Phoebe told me she was. Some of these people looked well into their 30s. I made a comment on that to Phoebe, and she said yes, some of these people aren't aging too well. I asked if she remembers all these people, and she said yes. I then asked who the party host was. I was curious to meet the owner of this big house. She said she hadn't seen him yet. Throughout the entirety of me being there, I felt like everybody was shooting me daggers. They wouldn't look away either. I whispered that to Phoebe, and she said back it's probably because they're wondering who I am. At the time, that was the only logical explanation I could think of too. It's hard to explain the growing awkwardness at this party, but I can assure you this was not what a normal high school reunion would be like. There was no music, and everyone was dressed weirdly, not like normal 28-year-olds, but that's the other thing, none of these people looked like they were in their 20s. I was getting uncomfortable with some of the stares I was getting in the room we were in, so I told Phoebe I'm going to run to the bathroom. Realistically, I just wanted to get out of that room and explore the house a little bit. I didn't have a drink in my hand or anything to make me feel at ease. I was just walking around this giant house empty-handed, and anyone I passed stared at me. To say I felt out of place would be the understatement of the century. I found the bathroom, I stepped inside, even though I didn't have to go. I locked myself inside just to sit and reorient myself, take a break from the awkwardness outside. I texted all my friends about how weird this reunion was and wondering how I could convince Phoebe to leave early. We'd already been there about 30 to 45 minutes, and this unnamed mystery party host was nowhere to be seen. Phoebe texted me, "Where are you?" I replied, "In the bathroom, give me a minute." Then I followed that up with, "This party is really weird, I'm down to leave soon." She said, "Why?" I said, "Everyone's being weird." Then someone knocked on the bathroom door, so I couldn't sit in there anymore. I washed my hands quick and left the bathroom, and the guy waiting outside, who looked like one of the younger ones here, said in a very low voice to me, "You should leave, that girl isn't who she says she is." I froze for a second, then said, "Phoebe." He said, "Whatever she told you her name is." He then asked what she told me this party was, and I said that she told me it was a high school reunion. The guy then smirked and said, "Do these people look like they're going to a high school reunion?" He left it off with, and I quote, "Trust me, leave sooner than later," and then he walked into the bathroom and shut the door. I almost knocked on the door to get him to come out and further explain, but I thought for a second. I was already suspicious and uncomfortable in this house. That guy just confirmed something weird is going on here. I walked straight to the front door without drawing attention to myself. I still felt people staring at me as I walked to the door. I walked straight to my car in the street and drove home. Phoebe texted me asking where I went. I didn't answer. When I got home, I looked up her number on White Pages. That number was not associated with the name Phoebe. The name that came up was Claire Foster. The address that I picked her up at both times is also different than the address that came up on White Pages, which made me realize I never saw her leave the house. She was already waiting on the sidewalk both times. I replied to her text, "I had to leave, I'm sorry," and blocked her number. My friends all made jokes, and they told me she thought she was weird and off from the start, but they didn't want to tell me that and make me feel bad. My one friend joked that it sounded like I was in the movie Get Out. My friends and family all have had little theories as to what was going on. Some people would even think I exaggerated the whole thing until I told them about the fake name the girl gave me and the guy telling me to leave sooner than later. This happened when I was a young child, maybe like 8 years old. My parents had me late. My two older siblings are both at least 10 years older than me. I was woken up in the middle of the night to a commotion from downstairs one night. It was my parents. I cracked my door open and heard my parents freaking out about something. I wasn't sure what it was. I went to the stairway and stood at the top calling down Mom, Dad. My mom came to the bottom of the stairs and said to me, "Go back to bed." I listened without asking any questions. I could tell they were stressed about something though. I was trying to go back to sleep when I heard the front door downstairs slam shut, and then it was dead silence. I presumed they left the house, but I wasn't sure why. Either way, I listened to my mom and went back to sleep. I woke up again to sounds downstairs once more. It was the sound of the front door closing and then footsteps, but no talking. Naturally, I assumed they were back home and just being quiet so that they wouldn't wake me up. I heard occasional steps and thuds from downstairs. I heard drawers and cabinets being opened and closed, and I thought for sure I heard the fridge opening too. I thought it was my older brother Chris, who's 10 years older than me, and at the time he was already driving, so he was going out and coming home late. So him getting home at like 2 a.m. and rummaging the fridge wasn't abnormal at all. These are all things I was telling myself logical explanations as to what I was hearing. Eventually, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs getting louder and closer until they reached the top, and then made their way first to my door. My door quietly and slowly opened. I didn't sit up or move, I just had my eyes open facing the door as I was still laying down. There weren't any lights on outside of my room. Whoever was walking around was doing so in the dark, so all I saw was this black mass at my doorway resembling the shape of someone's head. I said every name starting from Chris to Mom to Dad, then I just said, "Who's there?" They didn't reply, they just closed the door, and I was left there confused but mildly creeped out. I heard footsteps going downstairs. I was convinced it was my dad now, just coming to check on me after getting home, though I wasn't sure why he was ignoring me. I didn't hear anything from downstairs for a while now. I allowed curiosity to get the better of me, and I went downstairs in the dark. I kept all the lights off as I was approaching the kitchen, and I froze at the doorway, noticing a tall figure standing right in the middle of the kitchen. I said Dad, assuming it was him, just based off the size of this person. A deep voice said, "Go back upstairs." I ran back up the stairs to my room and closed the door and jumped under the covers. All I was thinking was, why did my dad's voice sound like that? The reality of a stranger being in the house didn't dawn on my innocent little mind, not until a little later when I heard the front door opening and a commotion from downstairs, again the voices of my parents. I went to the top of the stairway again, and they were shocked to see I was still awake. I asked what happened. They told me that Chris had a little accident, but that he was going to be fine. I found out months later that he had gotten into a car accident driving in a condition that he shouldn't have been driving in. My parents got a call from the hospital, and so they rushed to see him first thing, leaving me to sleep. I asked my dad if he had come in my room before, and that was when I learned that they had been gone for hours. My mom started freaking out, yelling at my dad because he had neglected to lock the door when they rushed out of the house. Me telling my parents about the person at my bedroom door and in the kitchen caused my dad to search the house with his gun and my mom to call the police. The last thing I really remember was being asked by a police officer to give my story. My parents tell me that they felt like morons having to explain to the cops that they left me alone and left the door unlocked. I don't think anything of value was stolen, even though whoever broke into the house clearly didn't have intentions of harming me. Having a complete stranger in your house is already a terrifying ordeal. Now imagine going through that at 8 years old. I once worked as a direct care aide for a 65-year-old woman with a developmental disability. Her daughter, who was in her 40s, worked overnights, and she needed a caretaker with medical experience to watch her overnight. When I say once worked for them, I mean I literally worked once just this night, and you're about to hear why I never went back. The 65-year-old woman's name was Martha. Her daughter's name, who contacted me, was named Colleen. It's possible Colleen didn't have any other family to watch her and didn't want to or couldn't afford to put Martha in a nursing home, or it was possible that she felt more comfortable hiring somebody with some form of experience to watch over her. At the time, I was already a direct care worker for 2 other women who suffered some forms of developmental disabilities, so I had experience, but nothing prepared me for that night. Colleen left for work earlier that day. I worked my first job, so I was really pushing my body to exhaustion, trying to make as much money as possible. Colleen had introduced Martha and I. Martha had given me a smile before Colleen brought her upstairs to her bedroom for the night. It was around 9 p.m. Colleen told me that Martha would sometimes walk around the house at night acting confused, and I need to calm her down and bring her back to her room. She specifically addressed this not to be a form of sleepwalking. When I asked, she said it's one of the symptoms of her mother's dementia. I told her to rest assured that I'd know how to handle it. I spent my time initially in the living room catching up on my show. These jobs aren't super glamorous, and for the most part it is a lot of sitting around. I heard footsteps from upstairs. I went to the stairway and looked up the stairs, then called Martha's name asking if she needed anything. She didn't answer. I heard her footsteps go back to her room, and then the door closed. Maybe she went to the bathroom. I went back to the living room and watched some more TV. It was maybe an hour later that I got up to grab my sandwich that I brought from the fridge. As I left the kitchen with a plate and my sandwich to go back to the couch, I nearly had a heart attack and dropped the plate when I saw Martha standing at the doorway. Glass shattered everywhere. I apologized to her and asked if she was okay. She started yelling at me, "Who are you?" I reminded her who I am. I'm her direct care worker here to make sure she's okay. Everything she said at this point was in a loud scream. "Why are you here? I don't know you," things of that nature. I reminded her that we had just met and that her mother Colleen hired me to watch her in the house. This seemed to work for long enough for me to get her to come back upstairs with me into her room. I brought her up a glass of water and some melatonin and made sure she took both before going back downstairs. After a few hours, I was absolutely exhausted. I had to get a couple hours of shut-eye. There was a spare bedroom upstairs with a twin-sized bed where Colleen said I could rest if needed. I felt like at this point Martha was asleep for the night from the melatonin. I fell asleep within minutes, but I was asleep for only maybe an hour. I woke up to a sound from downstairs. It was this repeated slamming every 1 to 2 seconds. Something from downstairs was being slammed. I jumped out of the bed. I had left the bedroom door open so that I'd hear anything if Martha got up. Case in point right here. When I got to the stairs, I realized the slamming was coming from the kitchen. I walked down the stairs in as quick of a speed as I could while still remaining quiet. Getting to the bottom, I peered around the opening to the kitchen, and what I saw was like a scene from a scary movie I'd seen before. I saw Martha in the darkness standing in front of the oven, repeatedly opening it and slamming it shut. It was horrifying. When I say I saw Martha, I really only saw her silhouette. It was that dark in the kitchen. I said Martha really loudly, and she stopped, turned to her left at me, shut the oven door one final time, and started walking towards me towards the stairs. I said in a now softer, kind of scared-sounding voice, "Are you okay?" She got close enough to me where I could now see her facial features, and she looked at me with this blank expression, then walked right past me and started walking up the stairs. I followed her upstairs, but as soon as she got to her room, she slammed her door shut. I knocked on the door saying, "Martha, are you all right?" She didn't respond. I quietly opened the door just to peek inside, and I saw Martha at the side of her bed, just standing facing the wall. I've seen a lot, but this was some pretty unsettling behavior that I feel like is the exact kind of stuff you'd see in some scary movies like I mentioned before. I walked over to her and gently eased her into the bed. When she was laying down, I covered her, and for what I was hoping would be the final time, I said, "Good night, Martha," and shut her door. I went across the upstairs to the spare room and went back to bed. I purposely tried not to fall asleep for at least half an hour just in case she'd wake up again, but I don't even know if I made it that long. All I know is I fell asleep pretty freaking quickly. I woke up once again, however, much later. The room was still pitch black, and the 1-hour alarm I set had not yet gone off. I looked around the room wondering what woke me up. I didn't see what it was until I heard a sound from inside the closet. I then noticed the cracked open closet door and the black shadow of a head peeking out of the closet. Again, I almost had a heart attack. I said, "Martha," she didn't answer. I kept saying Martha a bunch of times until she pushed the door open and I saw her approaching the bed slowly. She started saying what she was saying hours ago again. "Who are you? I don't know you." As she got closer, I tried calming her down, reminding her who I am. I reached for the lamp next to the bed and fumbled with it until it turned on. Martha was holding a huge kitchen knife in her hand. At this moment, everything changed. Martha was now a threat to my life, and I had to worry about myself, not her. I screamed at this point. Martha put the knife down. I guess my scream stressed her out because she got closer and started screaming back at me, still repeating, "I don't know you." I wasn't going to attempt to calm down a knife-wielding dementia patient. That was not in any job description. I mapped out a way to run around her in the bedroom, and I went for it. I jumped off the bed on the side further from her, and she screamed again, "Who are you?" She swung the knife at the air as I ran past her. It was a slow and weak swipe from what I saw, but nonetheless showed that she had intentions of actually using it. I got downstairs and grabbed my shoes and went outside. Instead of calling 911, I called Colleen as she requested I do if there's an issue. I was courteous in doing this because getting law enforcement involved is never doing anyone any favors. Colleen was yelling into the phone at me not to leave her, and honestly I yelled back that she attempted to kill me and that I didn't call the police. She had to leave work, of course. I stayed outside of the house making sure Martha didn't go anywhere until Colleen returned. When Colleen went inside, Martha was back in her bed asleep. Colleen went as far as accusing me of exaggerating the whole thing until she found the knife next to Martha's bed. To not give her any more fuel to blame me for any of this, I left out the fact that I ever went to sleep, but that doesn't mean that I felt in any way I did anything wrong. Colleen even offered me that room to sleep. I never worked in that house again. Martha was a scarier patient than I'd ever dealt with in any of my jobs in my 9 years of being a direct care aide. When I was 23, I had to move out of state for work. I still work with the company, but I've been able to move back to my hometown and work at the local office here. But at the time, I needed somewhere to live that wouldn't be bank-breaking. I made a posting on basically all the websites for a roommate: Facebook, Craigslist, Twitter, and even on my neighborhood subreddit. I had a guy named Rob reach out to me on Facebook stating he has a room available in his place. I looked at his pictures to see if he looked like a somewhat normal guy, and he did. I was open to the idea of having a male roommate as long as they seemed normal, even though my parents were very against it. Rob and I FaceTimed, during which he gave me a virtual tour of the place. Apparently, he owned the place outright. It was a modest house in the middle of town, only a 10-minute drive from where my office would be. He also seemed pretty nice. I didn't get any bad vibes at all. His price was fair, and his rules were pretty fair too. He said it was available to move in right away, which was perfect. So it was settled. A week later, I had all my things packed and drove down. I met Rob right out front of the house, where he greeted me and handed me a key. The first thing I noticed about him was he was really short. He was eye level with me. He helped me bring some of the bigger and heavier bags inside. He showed me my room, which was furnished already. He said one of his friends had been living there and recently moved out. I replaced all the pillows and bed sheets with my own, of course. The rest of that day was me settling in. Rob, I could see, was trying to get to know me and presumably make me feel at home. I didn't get any overly friendly vibes yet. The next day was Sunday. Rob offered to drive me around town to show me around. I wasn't eager to, but I said sure, just to get off on a good start with him. He drove us around town showing me where the good shopping centers are, good restaurants and stuff like that, but then he offered to get us lunch. I really wasn't hungry, and he was suggesting a sit-down lunch, almost like a date. I didn't want him to get any kind of wrong idea. I just needed a room. I said I'm not hungry, and then he right away suggested we go grab drinks somewhere instead. I politely shot it down too, saying I don't drink on work nights. He was being a bit pushy, saying come on, just a couple drinks. I still maintained my politeness and said another time. He gave up, and he went really quiet all of a sudden, like he was upset. I'll admit I was slightly uncomfortable, but nothing I couldn't handle yet. That week was my first week at work, and so my attention was focused mostly on adjusting to the work week. It wasn't until a few days into the week that I got home and did my laundry and noticed my hamper full of clothes seemed moved, like the clothes weren't how I remembered they were left. And it wasn't until I was loading the washing machine that I noticed a pair of my underwear was missing. I checked my room top to bottom like 5 times. It was gone. I had a disturbing thought. What if Rob? No, I refused to believe that just yet, and there was no chance in hell I would confront him and ask him that. Still, I was now starting to wish there was a lock on the bedroom door. That weekend, I bought a lockable doorknob from Ace Hardware, and while Rob wasn't home, I swapped out the current doorknob with the new one. Now I could leave the place in peace. I figured I'd tell Rob the next time I saw him. He didn't come home that night, though. He must have been working. His schedule seemed pretty random. That night, I awoke to banging on my bedroom door. It was Rob. He was saying my name, and he didn't sound happy. I checked the time, and it was like 1:30 in the morning. I decided I would pretend I'm asleep. I was honestly kind of scared to open the door. I had a feeling it had to do with the doorknob, and I was right. The next morning, I woke up to a bunch of texts from Rob saying we need to talk, be home after work. I simply responded, is this about the doorknob? And he responded back, yes. I apologized to him and said I was planning on telling him. He replied back, it comes off today. I was getting incredibly nasty and weird vibes from his tone. My next response, I thought out a little longer and basically said how I hope he can sympathize and understand that I'm a girl and I just feel safer being able to have privacy in my room. He responded a little nicer this time, but he still basically said no to my request. and that the old doorknob needs to go back on. I was confused, I was upset, but I had to respect his rules. I did also install it without telling him, so I felt like he had a right to be kind of mad. But how did he know I changed it? It's not like I had the old doorknob sitting out in the open. The idea that he tried coming into my room that night kind of scared me. I changed the doorknob back the next day and returned to Ace. This is where things went really downhill though. There was a knock at the door one day when Rob wasn't home. It was a girl around my age. She asked me if I was living here with Rob, and I said yes. She warned me to get out of there immediately, that Rob has multiple restraining orders against him from different girls, and he's known to be a very dangerous, creepy stalker. I was at a loss for words. I asked her how she knew I was here. She said she knew that he was trying to rent his room and that it's not surprising he opted to have a girl move in. She said she saw me moving in and wanted to wait till he wasn't home to come warn me. I thanked her so much. I truly was terrified now. I had already paid Rob for the entire month. I didn't know what to do. She said she would help me in any way she could. I took her number and she left. I started packing my things and looking for other places I could move to. I found something across town, a studio apartment sublet, for a little more money. I contacted the poster of the ad and she told me I could move in as soon as possible. Perfect. Now I just needed to tell Rob and get my money back. I started packing some of my stuff into my car and I texted him that I'd have to be moving out tomorrow as something with my family came up and I needed to go home. He didn't answer. He got back to the house about an hour later and asked me about my text. I came up with my best fake story possible and he said, yeah, he'll give me the money back tomorrow after he goes to the bank. I was super relieved. About an hour later, he knocked on my door and then said, did by some chance some girl say something to you? I simply said, no, what do you mean? And he said, never mind, it just seems like you're running away out of here for another reason. I insisted that it was purely because of the family reasons. He said okay and left. Sadly, the story didn't end there. I woke up that night and screamed at the top of my lungs when I saw a black figure sitting on the end of the bed. It was Rob. He turned and put his hand on my mouth and went shh. I said, please don't hurt me, and he responded, why would I hurt you? I knew someone said something to you, don't believe what these girls say. I said, you're scaring me, and this part is still just as insane to me as it was in that moment. He started to caress my leg, and he said, I don't mean to scare you. Right after I said he's scaring me, I got out of the bed and ran for the door, and he screamed at me to stop. I ran outside with my phone in hand and called the police. I hid in the bush until they showed up, and I explained the entire situation to them. They made Rob come outside and give his side of the story. Basically, I told them I just want to get all my stuff out of the room and I'm leaving. So the cops stayed there as I collected the remainder of my stuff and brought it all to my car. I also insisted on Rob then handing me the money back while the police were there, and he did so actually. The whole time the police were there, he tried his best to act like some normal dude. I could tell one of the officers then pulled me to the side to tell me that this guy had been arrested before for other incidents with women, but Rob denied ever coming in my room or touching me or anything, so it was all he said, she said. I left the house and went straight to a hotel for the night. The next day, I moved into the studio apartment. Luckily, the girl who posted it was able to facilitate my quick move in. I have never and will never live with another man who's not my boyfriend or husband ever again, or just anyone I don't know for that matter. It was New Year's Eve of 2020, and all of us were ready for this horrible year to be over. My friend Logan was throwing a house party. I arrived early to help set things up. I secured a spot to sleep in his parents' room, meaning I could drive to the party and drink without having to worry about driving home. His parents obviously weren't home for the night. Most of our close friends in our friend group came, plus a bunch of Logan's friends who I didn't know. The party was fun. At midnight, everyone screams Happy New Year and cheers their drinks. After that, people slowly started circulating out, and the party started to quiet down as people went to either other parties, bars, or home. The later the night got, the more it became just the closer friends staying behind, until it just turned into a chill drinking session in the living room. This went on late into the night. It was likely 3 a.m. when the last of everyone who wasn't sleeping at Logan's house was gone. As it quieted down, we started hearing this occasional sound. At first, we didn't know what it was, but it soon started to sound like a creaking sound. It was dismissed as a sound from the fridge or something at first, which I know sounds stupid, but house appliances often make weird noises. It was just Logan, me, and Cody. Cody was falling asleep on the couch already. It was reaching that time where we were just going to go to sleep. However, eventually we got so bothered by the noise that we had to search. We went to the kitchen and it wasn't coming from in there. We realized when we were close to the basement door that it was coming from downstairs. Logan opened the door and we heard this creaking sound. "Go check what it is," I said. He kept saying no way. Then he called down into the basement, "Yo, who's down there?" The creaking stopped and we never heard it again. After a solid minute of waiting at the top of the stairs, we agreed to go down together. We both grabbed knives, drunkenly thinking that was a good idea, when in reality we were so drunk we'd probably only hurt ourselves with them. We got to the bottom of the stairs and looked through the entire basement. It's not huge, it just has a couch, TV, a bar, a table in the corner, and various old pieces of junk. It was pretty messy at the time. The first thing we did was search any possible crevice for someone who could be hiding. Then we tried to figure out what could have been making that sound. I noticed a rocking chair, and so I went up to it, sat in it, and then started rocking in it, and it made the exact same creaking sound we had been hearing. Logan and I looked at each other. I stood up, and so did every hair on my body. I don't think we ever ran faster than we did when we ran up those stairs and slammed the door shut. We tried to come up with any logical explanation, but there was none. He kept the basement door locked for days until his parents came back. There was no living soul down there, but something was moving that rocking chair. That rocking chair used to belong to his grandma who passed away forever ago, and it's just something his mom held on to for sentimental reasons. I can't say I've ever experienced anything resembling the paranormal before this, nor since then. It still sends chills down my spine.